This is Mac OS Ken.
Another record June quarter for Apple. It is Wednesday, the 28th of July, 2021. I'm Ken Ray, and this is news from Mac OS Ken, brought to you by yours truly and sponsored by Upstart. Fair and fast personal loans. Learn more and check your rate at upstart.com/macOSKen. This show is also supported by people like you, patrons through Patreon. Find out more and add your support at patreon.com/macOSKen. Technically, every quarterly earnings report from Apple is one for the history books. We don't talk about the bad ones that way, though, so when I say yesterday's report was one for the history books, you know it's got to be good. And it was. Apple's press release on the numbers heralded a new June quarter record. Apple reported June quarter record revenue of $81.4 billion, a 36% rise over the $59.7 billion Apple reported for the same quarter a year ago. That $81.4 billion beat Wall Street's expectation of $73.8 billion pretty handily. The Street had expected earnings per share of $1.01. Apple beat that by more than a quarter, reporting earnings per share of $1.30. We'll do product categories first, then a bit of touchy-feely, nothing kinky, then the Q&A. What do you say? For iPhone, Wall Street had expected revenue of $34.5 billion. What it got was revenue of $39.6 billion. While the numbers beat the Street, they trounced iPhone revenue of $26.4 billion for the June quarter of 2020, an increase of 50%. Before diving into iPhone, Apple CEO Tim Cook said that most of the markets Apple tracks grew double digits, with especially strong growth in emerging markets, including India, Latin America, and Vietnam. We'll hear lots more about that throughout today's recap, starting on the phone. Cook said on the call that iPhone saw very strong double-digit growth in each geographic segment, and that, while the 5G thing is just getting underway. Something else heard a few times throughout the call. Getting nerdy with the numbers was Apple CFO Luca Maestri. He had the 411 from 451 Research. According to that firm, customer satisfaction with iPhone in the U.S. stands at 97% for the iPhone 12 line. Mac revenue was $8.2 billion, up significantly from revenue of $7.1 billion for the same quarter a year ago, a rise of 16%. That set a June quarter record for Apple's computers, according to Mr. Cook. That's true on average. CFO Maestri said the Mac set revenue records in most of the markets the company tracks. According to Mr. Maestri, the last 4 quarters for Mac have been its best 4 quarters ever. iPad saw revenue of $7.4 billion, up 12% over the $6.6 billion in the year-ago quarter. That came despite significant supply constraints, according to CFO Maestri. Now, it seems wrong to lump Apple's computers and Apple's what's a computer, but they did, so I will. 451 Research has U.S. customer satisfaction at 92% for the Mac and 95% for iPad. As tends to be the way, half the people buying each of those products last quarter were new to their respective machines. According to CFO Maestri, when you combine their performance, Mac and iPad, over the last 12 months, they're now the size of a Fortune 50 business. Wearables, home, and accessories went nutsoid, showing revenue last quarter of $8.8 billion, up over $2 billion or 36% from the $6.5 billion for the same quarter a year earlier. That marks a new June quarter revenue record. In fact, Maestri says the category set revenue records in every geo Apple tracks. Throw a spotlight on Apple Watch. The CFO says almost 75% of people buying an Apple Watch in the June quarter were new to that product. Services numbers definitely came with a smile. Apple reported revenue for the category of $17.5 billion, up over $4 billion from the $13.2 billion in services revenue for June of last year. Mr. Maestri attributed last quarter's numbers to all-time records for cloud services, music, video, advertising, and payment services, and June quarter records for the App Store and Apple Care. While he did not break them out, the CFO gave a shout-out to new services offerings, including Apple TV Plus, Apple Arcade, Apple News Plus, Apple Card, Apple Fitness Plus, and the Apple One bundle. People keep buying it, and they are contributing to overall services growth. That's great for Apple's bottom line. But what about developers? Cook cited a new study by the Analysis Group. They say 2020 was a record year for App Store developers, with combined billings and sales of $643 billion in 2020, up 24% over 2019. Looking ahead on services, Mr. Maestri accentuated three positives. First, a record high installed base of devices in every geo Apple tracks. Second, a record high number of transacting and paid accounts on Apple's digital content stores in every geo Apple tracks. And third, strong growth for paid subscriptions, with more than 700 million paid subscriptions across the services on Apple's platform. Plus more services to come like iCloud Plus, which was previewed at WWDC. Apple CEO had another number to toss onto the services pile, 35. That's for the 35 Emmy nominations for Apple TV Plus. Shout out to the series Mythic Quest, the upcoming film Coda, and of course, Ted Lasso. Let's hit the touchy-feely bits, and again, nothing kinky. Apple CEO mentioned how great it was to hit D-Town Loss A for the opening of Apple Tower Theater. He didn't mention getting his picture taken with me, but that's cool. I've probably mentioned it enough for both of us. Of the event, Mr. Cook said it was a hopeful reminder of the energy and sense of community shared spaces bring, and how appreciative we all are now of the simple privilege of talking to one another face to face. Worth noting, that followed a less optimistic look at today. Quoting Cook again, as the last 18 months have demonstrated many times before, progress made is not progress guaranteed. An uneven recovery to the pandemic and a Delta variant surging in many countries around the world have shown us once again that the road to recovery will be a winding one. In the midst of the enduring adversity, we are especially humbled that our technology has continued to play a key role in keeping our customers connected. Still, accentuate the positive. Cook talked about WWDC and the new tools announced during that event that'll help developers build the next big thing. Today's investments in education and coding translate to tomorrow's small businesses and groundbreaking new apps, according to the CEO. Still on the WWDC front, Cook talked privacy features coming in iOS 15, including mail privacy protection and app privacy report. He talked about what he called incredible next-generation technologies coming to the accessibility space, including assistive touch and new voiceover capabilities. And he talked about plans for the health space, including the health sharing feature that'll make it easier to securely share user health data with loved ones. But, said the CEO, the responsibility to be a force for good in the lives of others extends beyond the technology Apple makes. Here he hit moves like the innovation grants awarded last quarter to engineering schools at 4 historically black colleges and universities through the company's Racial Equality and Justice Initiative. We see education as a great equalizing force, said the CEO, adding that Apple's more dedicated than ever to supporting the educators, advocates, and students, lining the path and leading the way. Cook also addressed the $1 billion Apple's kicked in to help solve the affordable housing issue/problem/crisis in the San Francisco Bay Area and across California. And special thanks to the humans, the ones who make the stuff we sell and who buy the stuff we make. Quoting Mr. Cook, Our greatest source of inspiration isn't technology itself, but how people use it in their own lives in ways great and small, to write a novel or to read one, to care for an ailing patient or see a doctor virtually, to track their heart rate on a jog, or to train for the Olympics. Every day, I'm grateful for the dedication of our teams to the simple mission of creating technology that improves people's lives, and I want to thank everyone at Apple for the purpose and passion they bring to that mission. It's possible that Apple CEO was laying the groundwork for giving no guidance on earnings for the current quarter when he said progress made is not progress guaranteed. Given #these times in which we live, CFO Maestri said the company would not offer guidance, but it had no problem giving insight. While Apple does expect very strong double-digit revenue growth in the September quarter, last month's 36% won't be repeated. The CFO gave 3 reasons for that. 1, the company expects foreign exchange rates to be less friendly than they were last quarter. 2, growth for services will return to a more typical level. Maestri pointed here to a favorable compare for the June quarter that the September quarter will not have. And 3, greater supply constraints for the September quarter than the June quarter, primarily impacting iPhone and iPad. But hey, 22-cent stock dividend in a few weeks, and did he mention very strong double-digit revenue growth in the September quarter? Pretty sure he did. We'll go to the phones in a moment, but first a word from Upstart. Fair and fast personal loans. Are you making your credit card payments? That's great. Would you like to get ahead of them instead? Whether it's paying off credit cards, consolidating high-interest debt, or funding personal expenses, over 500,000 people have used Upstart to get a simple, fixed monthly payment. Upstart looks at more than your credit score, factoring in income and employment history. That lets them offer smarter rates with trusted partners. So you may be able to take those high-interest payments you're making a few places and turn them into one simple payment with lower interest. With a 5-minute online rate check, you can see your rate up front for loans between $1,000 to $50,000, and you can receive funds as fast as 1 business day after accepting your loan. Find out how Upstart can lower your monthly payments today when you go to upstart.com/macOSKen. That's UPSTART, upstart.com/macOSKen. Don't forget to use my URL to let them know I sent you. Loan amounts will be determined based on your credit, income, and certain other information provided in your loan application. Go to upstart.com/macOSKen. Right. Let's see what the analysts had to say or what questions they had to ask. This time last year, we heard from Apple that there would be no new iPhones in September of 2020. On the June earnings call a year ago, CFO Maestri said, almost as a throwaway, in 2019, we started selling new iPhones in late September. In 2020, we project supply to be available a few weeks later. That's pretty much a quote, with the years thrown in for clarity. Coming back to this year, clarity is probably what Raymond James analyst Chris Casso was looking for in his first question. Not that he was clear in his asking. Quoting his cue, just thinking to the commentary on guidance a little bit, just starting with the fact that last year, obviously, there was a later launch of iPhone than what we typically see in other years because you talk us through that and perhaps some of the other products. What may be different as compared to last year? I get why he didn't ask whether iPhone was going to be late. That would probably have triggered the usual response, we have nothing to announce today. What he got instead was a repetition of the color commentary from CFO Maestri. Double-digit growth, though not 36%, hampered by Forex, more normal services growth, and supply constraints. Initially, I thought Maestri was saying, yes, there will be a new iPhone this quarter. Going back over his answer, though, he really said nothing explicitly. Casso also wanted to know what the September quarter supply constraints would mean for the holidays. Of course, that is looking ahead a quarter, not a thing Apple likes to do. Citigroup analyst gentleman Jim Suva wondered whether spikes in COVID-19 and literal floods in the supply chain and other world events are affecting R&D and innovation for Apple. CEO Cook pointed to Apple's resilience and the super stuff its employees have been able to pull off in #these times in which we live. Shannon Cross of Cross Research wondered what Apple had learned from the current iPhone cycle. CEO Cook didn't answer that question exactly, though he did talk about the double-digit growth seen for both switchers and upgraders. In fact, he said it was the best Q3 for upgrades so far. And yet we've just begun where 5G is concerned. That leaves Apple feeling really good about the future of the iPhone. Cross also asked about China, which was back to insane levels of growth. Wearables, home, and accessories, the Mac and services each set June quarter records for China. For the Mac and iPad, 2/3 of people buying in China were new to their respective machines. For Apple Watch, that number was 85%. Evercore analyst Amit Daryanani wondered what's driving services growth. CFO Maestri pointed to an all-time high for the installed base, more people participating with both free and paid apps. The more they play, the more they eventually pay. Plus, new services all the time, so there you go. The Lord bless and keep Morgan Stanley analyst Katie Huberty for saying/asking what most people are a bit squeamish to say/ask. Has Apple done well despite the pandemic or because of it? That may sound harsh. For the record, after a bit of a preamble, her question was your business helped or was it hindered by the pandemic? Giving a kind of squeamish answer was CFO Maestri. Yeah, okay, digital services did well early on when entertainment options were limited. Although working from home and learning at home was good for hardware sales, at the same time, store closures, both Apple and others, might have held down sales of iPhone and Apple Watch, and they did hold down advertising and Apple Care. And hey, we don't really know how Mac and iPad could have done because we've been so constrained on them for so long. He ended his response saying, I can tell you that we're all looking forward to a COVID-free world. I think that would be very good for us and for the entire, for our customers as well. I love Katie Huberty for asking that question. Kind of a fan of her next one, too. Usually, after a big iPhone year like iPhone 12's had, revenue for the follow-on iPhone tends to feel pressure. Will that happen with the next iPhone? CEO Cook said he would not predict the next cycle, but iPhone has a large and growing install base. iPhone has loyal and satisfied customers. Apple has the top 3 selling smartphones in the US. Apple has 4 out of the top 5 smartphones in the UK. And Apple has the top 3 selling smartphones in Japan. And did he mention we are just at the start of the whole 5G thing? Cook says those are the kinds of things he would consider if he were predicting the next cycle. Piper Sandler analyst Harsh Kumar had a boring question about the age of iPhones and the installed base. Actually, the question wasn't boring, but the answer was. Then he had an interesting question. How does Apple decide between buying and building semiconductors? Apple CEO says they try to figure out whether they can build it better. If they can, they'll build it. If they can buy something just as good instead, they'll buy it. Though his was not the last question, we will end with one from UBS analyst David Vogt. With all the focus on the high end of the iPhone 12 line, does Apple see less of a need for budget models like the iPhone SE? Apple CEO thinks not. He says Apple had an incredible quarter for the emerging markets, setting June quarter records in Mexico and Brazil and Chile and Turkey and UAE and Poland and Czech Republic, India, obviously, and China, Thailand, Malaysia, Vietnam, Cambodia, Indonesia. Oh, he could go on. That was all done with a full lineup from iPhone SE all the way up to iPhone 12 Pro Max. Quoting Mr. Cook, I think we need that sort of range of price points to accommodate the types of people that we want to accommodate, and so we want something for the entry buyer who really wants to get into an iPhone, and then something for the pro buyer who wants the very best iPhone that they can buy. He thinks that goes as well for emerging markets as it does for the US and other developed regions. There were more questions raised and more answers offered. 4 great ways for you to learn more. First, Tuesday's call is available now to stream on Apple's investor site. It is investor.apple.com. It's also up as a podcast. While such things tend to live forever, Apple's will only be up for a couple of weeks, so hop to it if you want to hear it. If you want to get really nerdy, you can check out Apple's condensed consolidated statements of operations on Apple's investor site. And finally, if you're more of a reader than a listener, really? After all this time? Seriously? Hey, maybe you want to read along. Anyway, iMore has provided its usual invaluable service, posting a transcript of the earnings call to its site. We will, of course, hit some analyst reaction to Apple's earnings on tomorrow's edition of macOS Ken, plus start trying to catch up on other Apple news. Coming up in a few minutes, Ted Lasso is not the only off-kilter show on Apple TV+. Musical theater aficionado Mike Rose and musical fan me talk over the curious series that is Schmigadoon. Look for and listen to it in a few minutes. You can find that at macosken.com or wherever you get podcasts. macOS Ken, brought to you by me and sponsored by Upstart. Fair and fast personal loans. Learn more and check your rate at upstart.com/macOSken. This show is also supported by people like you, patrons through Patreon. Find out more and add your support at patreon.com/macOSken. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media, online at backbeatmedia.com. You can reach me a couple of ways. Info at macosken.com or call 716-780-4080. Until next time, that is news from macOS Ken. I'm Ken Ray.
Ciao.